Our class for today is physics. All right. So let us begin our class. Hanapin ko lang. Oh, here is the diagnostic test in physics. Were you able to answer? Were you able to answer your physics exam? Kumusta naman? Kumusta naman ang pagsasagot niyo ng physics niyo? How many of them were you able to answer? And how many of them were ang napansin niyo na parang hindi ko yata alam ito or nakalimutan ko na ito? Tamang tsamba lang ulit. It's okay. If you notice the questions in physics, they are a bit advanced. And I'll be the first to tell you, the questions that we put here in the physics material, especially this specific physics material, is as a supplement for the diagnostic test and virtual classes ng premium before. Sabi nga namin, this part of the sessions, the Jumpstart sessions, weren't really included when we started this. Okay? So, may mga kakaibang tanong dito, but I will be discussing the relevant items. And some of them actually are computational, but it's not the computation that is important. And that is what I will be discussing with you this afternoon. So, diagnostic test in physics. And just like your chemistry session last time, we will have a Kahoot It game later on. Okay, so yung mga lahat naman kayo online ngayon, so you'll be able to use Kahoot. I'll activate the Kahoot game later. Okay, so yung mga items natin will come from our lesson right now. So let me introduce myself. I am Neb Perez. I'm an instructor in UP Los Baños Electrical Engineering Department. Madalas, napapagkamalan, ano ba yung spelling ng pangalan ko talaga? Madalas, they think that it's the reverse lang ng Ben, but that is really my name. Sabi nga nila, what's your name? Ano yan? Shortcut ng Benjamin? No. My name is Neb Perez, and that is it. It's very short. You can actually search me sa Facebook or sa Facebook na lang ako search. I'm sorry, I don't really accept friends request nang wala akong common friends. So marami ilan tayong estudyante na may ano dito, may mga nagre-request sa akin, but you can ask me anytime kasi halos wala akong Facebook. I generally use Facebook just for Messenger. Okay? So let us begin. It's now 2:06, just in time. Let's begin with our physics class. Okay? So, question number 1. When one quantity is graphed versus another, and the result is a straight line, the quantities are what? When one quantity is graphed versus another, and the result is a straight line, the quantities are what? B, marami, directly proportional. Okay, so let's look at the 3 common relationships. So equal, inversely proportional, both constant. Let's look at the 3 relationships. This has a constant relationship. Graph pa rin ito. And again, this is a mix. Some questions in physics, some questions in math, makita mo sa science, bakit may mathematics dito? But in reality, when you take the UPCAT, when you take multiple college entrance tests, kakaunti naman ng computation. Most of the time, they are conceptual mathematics, conceptual physics. So, this is a constant graph. This is a direct graph. Ibig sabihin sa kanya, as x increases, y increases. So, direct relationship siya. And sa kabila naman, this is the inverse relationship. Actually, to be more precise, the inverse relationship is 1 over x. So, hindi siya straight line. It has to be curving a little bit. Okay? So, which one among the choices is the correct answer? Is it B, directly proportional, or D, inversely proportional? Okay, which one? All right. So, the answer for this question, number 1, first question natin, ito lang kailangan tandaan, this is constant or equal, direct, and this is the inverse, the answer for this one is directly proportional. Letter B. Tama ba? Letter B. Nalito na. Tama ba? Nakakuha ba? Marami nagsagot na letter A? Letter A is both constant. They're not constant. It's a straight line. So, a straight line na pataas tayo. So, the answer here is directly proportional, which is letter B. Okay? Let's go. Number 2. I know you know this. Dito walang magkakamali yung mga estudyante. I'll just discuss it anyway. Why? Why is it directly proportional? Why is it not? Okay, let me check with it, this with you. Okay, when one quantity is graphed versus another and the result is a straight line. Straight line doesn't mean horizontal. Okay, a straight line value means meron kang straight line like this one. This is a straight line going up. So ito yung direct proportion natin. Ito yung constant graph. Ito yung ibig sabihin na constant or both constant. X, as x increases, y stays the same. So function ito na tinuturo sa mathematics, but this also directly involves physics since we have a lot of graphing in physics. Okay? So inversely proportional is pwede kang direct inverse or pwede kang inversely proportional 1 over x. Basta as x increases, y decreases. For physics, most of the time, it is yung inverse na ganito. Sakit lang ha. Oops. Back. Wala, hindi ko kaya. Okay. So number 2, which one is correct? All scalar quantities have direction. All scalar quantities. Ang sagot nyo na dito, nakita ko kanina, lumalabas is letter B, which is correct. Now let's discuss muna. It's not as important knowing kung ano yung values nito, but ano yung tama sagot, but more of discussing which one is a vector and which one is a scalar value. So vector values, ang importante dito is magnitude and direction. Scalar values are magnitude only. Now, here is the thing about physics. It is only when discussing vector and scalar values that it is critical to remember the terms. For example, you have displacement, which is a vector, and distance, which is scalar. Velocity is a vector, speed is scalar. Acceleration is a vector, and time is scalar. Forces is another vector. Now, when you do this, you just need to remember this. It has magnitude. Displacement, for example, is 5 meters east. Distance is simply 5 meters. Velocity is 25 kilometers per hour going to Manila. That's velocity, direction, and speed. Direction and magnitude. For speed, you just say 25 kilometers per hour, and that's it. Acceleration always has direction, and forces is a vector quantity. Time is a scalar quantity. Now, sabi ko nga sa inyo, it is only when discussing this that it is important to remember. After knowing the difference between vector and scalar, it will always be considered. If the subject is physics, if the subject is science, all terms will be considered as vector. Madalas kasi nagkakamali lang yung teacher, nagkakamali yung libro, but basically, after differentiating scalar and vector, kakalimutan na natin ang scalar quantities. We always talk about vector quantities. Okay? Nakuha nyo ba yon? Medyo confusing siya, but if you kung naka-attend na kayo ng physics before, di ba? Pansinin nyo, nung itinuturo lang ang vector and scalar, tsaka lang siya din-differentiate. Afterwards, nagkakamali na teacher nyo. Sinasabi niya, the speed of a car is this way. The distance traveled is this way. Okay? It's going to always be vector. Okay? So, the answer for this one, all scalar quantities have directions. This is wrong. Ay, iba hindi pa nakapag-physics. Okay? It does happen sometimes. But the teachers will have a tendency. I have a tendency to do this. Our teachers have a tendency to do this. Nasa engineering na kami where we don't really talk about scalar values. Madalas, nadudulas pa rin na teachers namin na sinasabi pa rin ang speed and distance. Okay? Yes. Thank you, Franz, yung kaninang dinidiscuss nyo. May konting curve ang 1 over x. That's the inverse. Medyo ano lang tayo ngayon. Proceed na tayo sa items natin. Again, as I said, this physics material specifically is in support. Kung mapapansin nyo dito, the topics aren't as common as the other ones. So, another example. Ito na yung pinakamaganda example. The distance traveled will be this one. And the displacement is from start to finish. All right? Now, we forget about scalar values altogether. We now go to number 3. An example of an object whose motion is not accelerated is a vehicle that blank. An example of an object whose motion is not accelerated is a vehicle that blank. Which one is your answer? Okay, after discussing item number 3, let's go back to item number 1. Okay, kasi masyadong maraming nalilito sa item number 1. I will need to use a pen for that one. But for number 3, it turns at a curve at a constant speed of 10 kilometers per hour. Maraming sumasagot niyan. Descends at a hill at a speed that increases uniformly from 10 to 40. Descends at a hill at a constant speed. Okay. Nakalagay dito is not accelerated. Here's the thing about physics. Here's the thing about science questions in the UPCAT and college entrance tests. Mahilig sila sa word not. All right? And you have to take note of the word not whenever you see it, because it is about looking at the opposite. You're looking at the false item. Ngayon, nakita nyo dito from the choices, there are 2 choices with constant speed na nakalagay. Constant speed of 10, constant speed of 40, but one of them is turning. When is acceleration experienced? Di ba tandaan nyo, acceleration is a vector value. So, importante ang kanyang magnitude and direction. So, when a direction changes, there is acceleration. Yes. So, these are the 3 types of acceleration. First, you're increasing your speed. Your direction is going to the right, but your speed is increasing. So, you are being accelerated. That's positive acceleration. Accelerating naman, slowing down, because meron kang speed and then your speed is slowing down. You now have negative acceleration, or in other terms, deceleration. And the other type of acceleration is when you change direction. Even if your speed is constant, as long as your direction is changing, you are accelerating. So which one is the correct answer? The answer for this one, nagsasabi na nga sa inyo lahat, okay, is letter B. Decelerating is negative acceleration. Okay? So, B, descends a hill at a constant speed. It means it doesn't change the speed, but it also doesn't change the direction. Right? So, tama kayo lahat. The answer for this one is letter B. Now, I will go back to item number 1 para maklear natin kasi marami talaga nalilito. And I will get a different example. So, yeah, I like this one. Using the pen, if you see this one, this wag yellow. I will use the medyo light. Okay? Direct is x is equal to y. When you increase your x, it can be on any point here. Okay? These are direct increase. Now, do naman sa inverse, the values here are given usually as x is y, is equal to 1 over x. When you have this value, the graph will be slightly napaganto. And it is asymptotic, napa-asymptomatic ako, asymptotic to a point. So y is equal to x, this is the inverse. Okay? But for the most part, this is also called a direct inverse. Y is equal to negative x is a direct a direct inverse, and this, yung may slope naman ako, y is equal to 1 over x, is inversely proportional. Okay? So, escape ko ulit ito. Because I need to go back to a presentation. I'm sorry I wasn't able to see your chats at the time when I was discussing it. Okay, so now go to number 3. For number 3, the answer is letter B. All right? So, let's proceed with number 4. Now, may mga comment dito, nakikita ko na. I'm just browsing the comment right now. Okay. Kung mapapansin nyo nga, questions dito, marami akong questions na may computation, but not about, the question isn't really about computation. It's really more of what happens here. So for example, in the absence of air resistance, a projectile has its maximum range when fired at an angle with the horizontal of what? Okay, I think you're all familiar with this. This is a graph that I could show you. At equal velocities of release, at an angle of 15 degrees, it will land at an angle of 75 degrees. And at an angle of 0 degrees, it will immediately stop. Its equal range as an angle of 90 degrees. Okay? But at 45 degrees, ito yung pinakadulo. At 45 degrees, it will have a maximum range. So, tama kayong lahat. The answer for this one is letter C. At what angle will it have a maximum range? C. Now, here's the question. At what angle will it have a maximum height? At what angle will it have a maximum height? Will it reach a maximum height? Okay? So, tama kayo sa maximum range is 45 degrees. Which one will have a maximum height? 75? $90. Yes. Minislead ko kayo ng konti dito sa 75, but it's actually at 90 degrees. 90 degrees reaches the maximum height. And if you actually notice, tingnan mo itong time na to, the time chart, the time color. The purpose of this time color is to tell you how long an object remains in the air. The maximum time is also at 90 degrees. So if you throw it vertically, it will spend the most time in free fall until it lands. It becomes shorter as the angle decreases. So at 45 degrees, makikita mo, it's approximately 1 and 40 seconds. But as you lower the angle, mas maikli siya bago tumama. Okay? So if you look at this one, 75 degrees and 30 degrees, the range is equal, but the height is, of course, different. And the time is also different. The time, if you throw it 75 degrees, is 1.93 seconds. The time, if you throw it at 15 degrees, is 0.52 seconds. But the range is equal for both. Okay? So the answer for number 4 is what? Agree naman lahat dito, 45 degrees. Okay? Pag nawawala ang audio nyo, there's two things kasi that happen when some of you lose audio or nagdodoble audio. The two things that could happen is nawalan ako ng internet ng mabilis, tapos nag-resume ako, and when that happens, the students with slower internet ay mawawala talaga. So you just need to refresh your internet. Minsan naman nagdodoble. Parang nagsasalita ako, minarinig ka nagsasalita pang isa pa, na ako rin. You can do two things. Say lang ha. You can do two things. You could either refresh or wait it out. Usually in 15 seconds, mawawala na rin yung double audio. Nangyayari madalas ng double audio if you're using cell phones. Okay? Tungkol sa epic skin, aralin namin mabuti kung paano ba yung mga skins na yan. Sorry, we don't play Mobile Legends kasi. Although Sir Ian does, I think. Okay? Number 5, the weight of a body is what? It's the amount of matter it contains. That refers to its inertia. It's basically the same quantity as its mass, but it's expressed in a different unit. Is the force with which it is attracted to the Earth. Which one is the correct answer? Okay? All right. I think all of you agree that it is letter D. But if you look at it, this one, it's the amount of matter it contains. This is called the mass. Diba? Refers to its inertia. Inertia naman is actually momentum. A static momentum is the inertia. It's basically the same quantity as its mass, but it's expressed in different units. Ito yung nakakatawa dito, and that's why we really did put it in. When you go to a weighing scale and you stand on a weighing scale, what is the measurement that you see? Okay? Pag tumayo ka, di ba, nasa weighing scale ka, anong sukat nyo na sa weighing scale? Sige nga, sabihin natin yung mga timbang nyo. I am currently 70 kilos. Sino dito yung ano yung mga weights nyo? Yung mga willing sabihin yung mga weights nyo. Diba? Lumalabas yung mga weights nyo, 70 kilograms, nakita 51 kilograms, okay? Is that your weight? I'm currently 60 kilograms, I'm currently 90 kilograms. Okay, yun yung mga weight nyo. Ang question ko dyan is that really your weight? That is the point of item letter C. Okay? Choice letter C is when you stand on a weighing scale, the weighing scale measures your weight, but it shows the unit in mass. Why is it that way? Bakit siya gumagana? Okay? Because the weighing scale is designed to be used on Earth. Yun lang yung reason doon. Your weighing scale is designed to be used on Earth. The result should be in newtons. But since the weighing scale is designed to be used on Earth, when you stand on it, the weight reading is multiplied by 9.8, divided by 9.8 to show your mass. But if you bring the weighing scale to the moon, for example, hindi mo na makikita ngayon ang tamang weight mo. Hindi mo na makikita ang tamang mass measurement mo. Okay? So the weighing scale really measures your weight, but it shows the results in mass because it was designed to be used on the surface of the Earth. Now, if you look at this one, ano lang difference niya? Sabi ko nga, scalar quantities. Your scalar quantity of mass is 150 kilograms. Maganda yung question mo, Paul. What if gamitin po sa space? I'll describe that later. Okay? Scalar quantity of 150 kilograms, this is your mass. Your weight, which is a force, is the attraction of the Earth's gravity towards you, and you just basically multiply it with 9.8. But for exam purposes, for entrance exam purposes, use the value of 10. Okay? Because you don't really need to compute too much. Alright? So, explain ko sa inyo. What if po gamitin sa space yung weighing scale? The result will be 0. Bakit 0 ang magiging weight mo? Because when you are in space, you are falling. So imagine nyo, you're standing on a weighing scale at the bottom of an elevator, and then the elevator goes up. Diba? Makikita mo, yung result ng weighing scale mo, magtataas. Your mass isn't changing, but since the elevator goes up, mag-i-increase ng konti yung measurement ng weight mo. But when you're from the elevator, from the top floor, and the elevator starts to go down, ano mararamdaman nyo? Your weight seems lower. Okay. Ang ganda ng expression mo, hindi ka mataba, nasa maling planeta ka. Tama ka rin dyan. Okay, pwede yan. But here's the thing. When you're in space, when you ride on an elevator, and the elevator goes into free fall, the weight measurement will be 0. And when you are in space and you are orbiting, you are in constant free fall. So your weight is 0, but your mass remains the same. So with that value, what is the weight of the moon? With that information na sinabi ko sa inyo ngayon, what is the weight of the moon? Kaya niyo sagutin? It seems like a trick question, but you can actually answer it. What is the weight of the moon? 1/6, 1/6, 0. The answer is 0. The mass of the moon is 1/6 of Earth. But the weight of the moon with respect to Earth, because it is falling down, the weight of the moon is 0. Nakuha niya? Alright. So maraming nakakuha. Nakuha niyo yung concept na yun of free fall at walang weight. Okay. Let's proceed with item number 5. Okay. So ito pala. Answer for this one, item number 5 is the force with which it is attracted to the Earth. Okay, that is your weight. Kagaya nga nito. Alright, number 6. Nakuha niyo? Frictional force between two surfaces in contact does not depend on what? Marami na naman to. Pansinin nyo to ha. On some items in physics, I highlight the word not. In others, hindi siya naka-highlight. But always be careful. You'll be attending the 37 tips eventually. A lot of you are attending the 37 tips workshop. In the workshop, one of my tips there is be careful of the word not. It's very dangerous. Okay? So most of you are answering B, and you will be correct. The answer for number 6 is letter B. But let me explain what happens. The formula for friction is equal to mu n. And what is mu? Mu is the surfaces involved. So meron kang force, meron kang applied force, meron kang normal force, which is the n, and then meron kang frictional force. Whenever you push an object, there is a friction. Now, ano tong mu na to? Okay? What does the mu value represent? The mu value is actually on the surface, on the microscopic level, makikita nyo na hindi siya perfectly flat. Okay? And because it's not perfectly flat, meron siya ngayon mga interaction. That causes friction. So, it depends on the material. It depends on the type of material in contact. Yun yung mu. So, for example, steel on ice, may nakapatok ang steel at ilalagay mo siya sa ice, the friction is almost 0. Diba? But if you have rubber, for example, rubber on concrete, the friction is high. It's because of the tiny imperfections that causes the friction. So, ang formula ng friction is F is equal to mu times N, and mu is dependent on the type of surfaces in contact. N is the weight. Makita nyo dito, walang surface area. So, the answer for this one is the areas of the surface. It doesn't matter what the area is. What's important is the type of surface in contact and the weight or the normal force of the object. Now, there are 3 types of friction. The 3 types of friction are static friction. Static friction is that object is not in motion. Mineral to minerals, somewhat like that, pero kasi po pwedeng paper on glass, for example. Pwedeng steel on steel. So whatever object that contacts, yun yung may friction. Or your hands, di ba? Your right palm over your left palm, if you rub your hands, ayoko na pakita screen ko. If you rub your hands, umiinit siya, that causes friction. Okay? Now, there are 3 types of friction nga. Static, sliding, and rolling. Static friction, the object is not moving. You apply a force, but there is friction that prevents it from moving. Okay? The friction is opposite the direction of your force. Next, in sliding friction, Sliding naman siya or kinetic friction, you have a force and there is motion. Now, when there is motion, friction is also opposite of your force. Friction is opposite of your motion. Okay, yun natatandaan nyo. Friction is opposite of motion. So if you're moving forward, the friction is trying to stop you from moving forward. And the last one is rolling. Rolling friction naman is if you're rolling an object, may friction pa rin yan. But it's much smaller than sliding friction. It's also the reason why you can roll a tire at gugulong siya tuloy-tuloy. But eventually it will stop. The friction is also opposite of your force and opposite of the general direction of the object, diba? So gumugulong to, the friction is countering. Now, here is a question. Is there a situation where friction is the same direction as your motion? Medyo papalito to, no? If you actually notice, the principle of friction is that it is opposite in the direction of motion, opposite in the direction of force. But is there a situation where friction is in the same direction as the motion? Meron ba? Is there a situation where your friction is the opposite direction of your motion? It's the same direction as motion. Actually, dapat nakuha nyo na kagad na trick question yon. Yes, there is. How does it work? Okay? Yes, there is one situation. It is when the rolling motion is powered. Okay? Kanina, yung sample ko, nagpalit lang ng direction ng ating arrow ha. Kanina, yung motion niya is going to the right. The friction is going to the left. Okay? But, if the object is powered, kuwari gulong yan, the motion is going to the right, this one, friction is also, motion is going to the left, friction is also going to the left. Paano nangyayari yon? Imagine a car standing on ice. Diba? If you step on the gas, the wheels will move forward, but it will not. The car will not move forward. It's because there's very little friction on ice. But if you're on the ground, you try to move forward. The direction of motion is actually the friction is able to make you move forward. So in a powered wheel, the motion and the friction is the same direction. Pero kapag nag-freewheel lang kayo, kuwari, if you step on the gas, the friction is the same direction as motion, going forward. And in fact, it's the friction that makes your car move forward. And then, when you stop stepping on the gas, you will now slow down. Okay? Magiging freewheel motion na siya. The friction and air resistance will try to stop your car. So, anong situation? If the motion is powered, friction is the same direction as motion. Alright? Rare naman itong maitanong, but if it does happen, the answer is if you are operating a powered wheel. Isang gulong lang naman pinapagana pag kotse. Dalawa actually. Dalawa. Depending on your car, it's either both the front or both the back. So it's either four-wheel drive or two wheels. All right? So wag malito. For the most part, this is the only thing you need to remember. But on the case na kakailanganin nyo, powered wheel is the same direction as motion. Okay? Yeah, pareho lang yan. As long as the wheel is powered. When you ride your bike, only one wheel is powered, di ba? It's the back wheel. So pag nagbibisikleta kayo, the powered wheel is at the back, the front wheel is a free wheel. But when you stop pedaling, both wheels are free wheels. All right. Kuha na. Number 7. If you look at this one, when I see these types of numbers, medyo natatakot na ako agad. Ako, computation to. Mahirap ang computation na to. But here's the technique. If it's mathematics, kailangan nyo talaga mag-compute. Okay? But if it is in science, the computations will always be simple. But it will appear as if it's difficult. Okay? Look at this one. If two charged spheres were brought into contact, what will be the change at the charge of each ball when they are separated? So you have two charges, i-contact mo siya, and then magsiseparate siya. Okay? Most of you, I think, got it correct. The answer is letter B. How does it work? Simply, panakot lang yan, charges daw siya kunwari, but it's basically just averaging the charge. Okay? When two objects have charges and they come into contact, the charges will neutralize. And how does it work? You simply add the charges and divide it by 2. Or basically, you average the charges. So if there are 5 objects and they all come into contact, the charges will average. So the electrons will move to each one. So ang nangyari lang dito, Q1 plus Q2 over 2. Pag tatlong objects, Q1 plus Q2 plus Q3 over 2. So you have the first charge, 2.1 times 10 to the negative 7 C, or Coulomb, plus 1.0 times 10 to the negative C over 2, you will get 1.5 times 10 to the negative 7. All right? So it only appears difficult. They're basically just average it. It doesn't matter. The sphere is our basic example kasi yan ang pinakamadaling gawin. And ang kagandahan kasi in physics of a sphere, if it's a physics problem, a sphere will distribute the charges evenly. Okay? But if it's not a sphere, sometimes it will not go even. Kaya di ba may mga kidlat minsan sa mga spikes. Okay? But you will never experience a problem like that in your college entrance test. Lahat ba ng objects may charge? No. Not all objects have charge. But you have all experienced static electricity, di ba? Sino dito nakakapaglakad sa mall? Madalas mangyari sa akin to when I'm at Mega Mall, naglalakad ako sa department store and then may kukunin akong damit, bigla kang sa static electricity. Okay? So, paano nangyayari yon? Why is there static electricity at the tip of my finger? That is the contact point. Now, why is spheres used as an example? Because in spheres, the charges are distributed evenly. In irregular objects, sometimes there are points na mataas ang charge. So it won't really if you go into electrical engineering, you will understand it. Pero sa ngayon, okay lang. It will always be a sphere for your problems. Ang dalas nga nito, pag kasama ko yung misis ko, punta kami sa mall, iaabot ko sa kanya damit, magkakakuryentihan kami. Okay, that's static electricity. So, it will always try to neutralize each other. It will always try to average. All right? So, it seems complex, but it's actually quite simple. Number 8. Some people are prone to static electricity. I am very prone. Others, not so much. Okay? Number 8. The materials which are best conductors of heat are what? The materials which are the best conductors of heat are the metals. I think you all know this. Napakadali naman niya. Yes, it is metals. And the same reason why metals are good at conducting heat is the exact same reason why metals are good at conducting electricity. I'll show you. Okay, good conductors. Brass, aluminum, copper, iron, mercury, gold. Good insulators or bad conductors. Wood, air, foam, water, cotton, plastic. These are good insulators or poor conductors. How does it work? Because of the metal bonding principle, you have protons at the middle, and then you have free electrons. Okay? Those free electrons, when conducting electricity, they transfer from one atom to the other. Naituro sa chemistry niyo yan. Okay? That's why it's good. Metals are good at conducting electricity. Now, why is it also good at conducting heat? It's also those free electrons that move physically when they are heated. So kaya siya nagbe-blur na ganito. When you put in heat, the free electrons transfer to each other. Okay? So nagbabibrate siya, they keep on moving there because they are free. That's why they are also good conductors of heat. So the same reason why they're good conductors of electricity, which are the free electrons, is also the basic reason, it's also the reason why they are good conductors of heat, the free electrons. All right? So the answer for this one is metals. Sino sa inyo na nung bata, hawak-hawak yung mga pako at ihahawakan nila sa kandila hanggang sa patagalan kayo, contest kayo kung kailan nyo bibitawan? Yun ang mga challenge ng mga bata kami. Hopefully, hindi na nila ginagawa, pero I'm pretty sure there are still people who does that. Diba? Alright. Anong kite? Hindi ko maintindihan yung kite. Saranggola. Yung saranggola, I think you're talking about the experiment with sino yun? Benjamin Franklin. That was actually a misnomer. It's not a kite. He put in a key and then tinamaan ng lightning bolt yung key and the key sparkled. That was it. Okay? Daliri sinusunog ko, patagalan kami. Yeah, ganun na nga talaga yan. We've all been kids before. Okay, let's proceed. Number 9. This concept in physics, optics, appears in the UPCAT. I will guarantee that there will be one item about optics. Hindi mawawala ito. And ito yung nakakainis. Litong-lito rin ako dito. What is real, what is virtual, what is inverted, what is upright, what is enlarged, and so forth. Images produced by a plane mirror are always what? But believe it or not, the UPCAT question can be as basic as this one. Virtual and upright. Virtual and inverted. Which one? Most of you are answering letter B, and you are correct. It's letter B. If you are looking at a plane mirror, this is a plane mirror. This is the apparent source. This is what you feel you see, but this is the actual object, diba? So virtual siya. If you move it, how do mirrors work? Real images, the image appears in front of the mirror. Virtual images naman, image appears behind the mirror. So in a plane mirror, in a plane mirror, the image seems to be behind the mirror. Diba? When you look at the mirror, the image seems to be behind it. Kaya nga may mga sinasabi na parang ano siya. Kaya ang ano dito is, you could actually see a reverse dimension. Okay? Ruler madalas, virtual and real. Teka lang ha. Ito yung kailangan ng ruler madalas. Bakit kailangan ng ruler? Hindi naman masyado. Okay? So ano yung virtual and real? Okay, here is the clue. Real. Images appear in front of the mirror. It can only happen at concave mirrors. Virtual. Image appears behind the mirror. It doesn't actually need formula. Teka lang ha. Give me a few seconds. Yes, concept to, walang computations. And we won't really encounter a lot of computations in this one. So, virtual siya because the objects seem to appear behind the mirror. Real siya because the objects seem to be in front of the mirror. It depends on the position of the focus. Okay? Pero ito yung mas magandang description. So, virtual and upright. That's correct. Because when you look at the mirror, the object is upright, but it is virtual. Now, let's look at this description. On lenses naman, ano yung virtual tsaka real? If in the mirror, virtual appears behind the mirror and real appears in front of the mirror, sa lenses, it's the opposite. Virtual appears in front of the lens. Back. Real appears in front of the mirror. Virtual appears behind the mirror. For lenses, virtual appears in front of the lens. Real appears behind the lens. Okay? Ngayon, ito yung sinasabi may computation. Focus is less than F, enlarged. Between F and 2F, enlarged. Between 2F, greater than 2F, it's reduced. Okay? But it's real. Ito na lang tandaan nyo. For concave concave lenses, the image is always diminished, right way up, and virtual. Because this is the image and this is the object. Okay? So for concave lens, it is always virtual, it is always diminished, it is always right way up. For convex lens, once you remember concave na virtual sa lagi, maaalala nyo na ang convex lens ang may possibility of inverting. So di ba pag may magnifying lens kayo, tumingin kayo sa malayong bagay, nag-i-invert siya. That is because of the of the distance. If it is greater than 2F, it's reduced, it's also inverted. May bumulong ng water? Hindi. Ako ang bumulong ng water. Sorry. Pasensya na kayo. Dumaan yung wife ko kanina dito. Bumulong ko ng water. Medyo nauuhaw na ako. Natakot pala kayo lahat. Sorry about that. Okay? So, if you look at this one, convex lenses have a reversed image na greater than F, nag-invert siya. Alright? Natakot pala kayo lahat nung bumula ko ng water. Sorry about that. So, the answer for our question is virtual and upright. This is likely to appear in your UPCAT concave mirror, concave lens. It's always virtual, it's always reduced. Convex lens ngayon, ang tatandaan nyo, ito, magnifying glasses. What do you see with magnifying glasses? Okay? Number 10. Yung mga nahuling na bumulong ako nang nagsabi ako water, medyo natakot kayo. Sorry about that. Number 10. The volume of a gas is kept constant while its temperature is increased. You are familiar with this in chemistry. And what item in chemistry, what topic in chemistry is this? Anong naaalala niyo sa chemistry problems niyo? When I was in elementary, I always thought that physics and chemistry were the same thing. Okay? Yes, this is the gas laws. But the approach of chemistry and physics is different. Meron din tayong gas laws dito, but the approach of chemistry and physics is this. Chemistry, property siya. In physics, they're looking at each molecule movement. Ano nangyayari dito? When you increase the pressure, when the temperature is increased, what happens? Nagkakaroon ng maraming movement. And because of that movement, magkakaroon ngayon ng higher average speeds and strike against the wall more often. That's why the pressure is increased. So, the ideal gas law is the pressure-temperature relationship. The higher the pressure, the higher the temperature, the higher the pressure. So that is what it happens, how it works. So when you encounter a question like this in science, hindi na importante kung paano mo sasagutin. Ang importante, alam mo ang tamang sagot. Okay? You don't need to use chemistry principles. You don't need to use physics principles. But you only simply need to understand na it can work both ways. Yes, I was waiting for someone to say it. This is the Charles's law that you increase the temperature, the pressure on the walls increases. All right? Answer. The molecules have a higher average speed and strike the walls more often. That's why there is an increase in pressure. Number 11. Thermodynamics is also under physics. The first law of thermodynamics is the same as what? Gay-Lussac principle ba yan? Let me check. I'm not entirely sure. Pressure, tama kayo. Gay-Lussac nga. It's the pressure temperature. As I mentioned, sorry. Yeah, it was Gay-Lussac principle because, sorry for that, I'm a physics teacher. Hindi ako masyado familiar sa chemistry. I really thought it was the Charles's law. But yeah, it was the Gay-Lussac's law. For this one, law of conservation of energy, ang medyo unanimous na answer nyo, letter B. Is it true? Now, ano ba to? Zeroth law, law of conservation of momentum, first law of motion. If you actually look at this, thermodynamics has no concern for motion and momentum. So the answer could only be A or B. Ang question usually is, bakit may zeroth law? May turo ba sa inyo to kung bakit may zeroth law? Ano ba ang concept ng first law at zeroth law? When you were elementary, tinuruan kayo ng law of conservation of energy. Diba? Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed from one form or another. That is the first law of thermodynamics. Energy is conserved. It can be converted. Its form can be converted. The second law is energies can flow and equilibrate. And the third law is the driving force for equilibrium is uniquely defined in the third law. But what is the zeroth law? Bakit nagkaroon ng zeroth law? The reason for the zeroth law is this. Alam na ng lahat ng tao, widely accepted na that the first law is the law of energy conservation. And then they realized that, hey, there is a principle that is more fundamental than the first law. It's that the thermal equilibrium is transitive. So contained ang isa yung universe. That's why they said na instead na i-adjust natin yung first law, gawin natin second, isingit lang natin ng zero. Ito nga yung joke dito. Paano kung meron ka pang may na-realize sila in the future na mas fundamental ba kaysa zeroth law, anong gagawin nila? Magkakaroon sila ng negative 1 law. But it's unlikely to happen. Yes, kaya tinawag nila na zero. Kasi accepted na lahat na merong first, second, and third laws, and then na-realize nila may mas fundamental pala. Thermal equilibrium is transitive. So anong mas mababa sa first law? Zero law. Okay? Hindi na naman magkakaroon ng negative first law, but that's just a joke of it. So, letter B, the law of conservation of energy. I think I was in grade 2 or grade 3 nung tinuro ang law of conservation of energy sa amin. So, as young as that, tinuturo na sa atin yan. Imagine mo sa time nila Newton and before that, college na nila naiintindihan ang law of conservation of energy. All right? Let's proceed. Number 12. The plates of a parallel plate capacitor of capacitance C are brought together to 1/4 their original separation. The capacitance is now what? Ngayon, kaya ako sinasabi to kanina na medyo scattered itong physics material na to. It's because this physics material is really supposed to be a Supplementary material. If you attend the premium and the platinum discussions and you have the diagnostic test that we have in classroom, makikita nyo kung bakit supplementary ito. So, how does it work? The plates of a parallel plate capacitor of capacitance C are brought together to 1/4 the original separation. Kung naaalala nyo sa gravity, when you have two objects na pinaglapit mo, meron siyang negative inverse square law, di ba? But for capacitors, it's actually quite plain. The capacitance in farads is simply given by the permittivity of the dielectric multiplied by the area over the distance. Walang square. Okay? So, the smaller the area, the larger the distance, you have less capacitance. The larger the area and the smaller the distance, you have more capacitance. And masyadong direct siya. So, when you reduce the area to 1/4, you increase the capacitance to 4. So, for this item, 25 items lang tayo ngayon. For this item, the answer is C1D1 is equal to C2D2. The answer is letter C, 4. So if you increase the distance by half, if you increase the distance, you double the distance, ano lang siya? Yung capacitance niya would simply linearly increase or decrease. Okay? Any questions so far? Naalala niyo pa itong pinag-uusapan natin? We are exactly at 3 o'clock and my timing is perfect. Tandaan nyo na lang, may Kahoot tayo mamaya. Ano yung mga question? Kain lang po muna ako. Sure, no problem. Be back by 4 para makasali ka doon sa game natin. Okay? Number 13. When you go into college, you will actually be computing the angle at which this changes. Right? But since you are in high school right now, the only principle that you need to remember is this. This is still in optics, and this is the principle of refraction. Okay? As light wave passes from medium A to medium B, as seen in the picture, is speed what? What happens to its speed? Does it increase or does it decrease? Okay? What happens? The only principle you need to understand about refraction is this. Light bends towards the normal when it travels through denser medium. So for example, a person is standing at the top of a swimming pool. Ito yung direction ng light sa kanya, di ba? And then light bends towards the normal. When it bends towards the normal, ito yung normal line mo, it means that the water is denser than air. And you agree for that. You agree with that, di ba? Kung ikaw naman na nasa ilalim ng pool, when you look up, you have a denser medium, nasa water ka. And then when it goes outside, this is your normal, it goes away from the normal. So the principle you need to remember is this. Light bends towards the normal when it travels through denser medium. And when when a medium is denser, your speed decreases. So for example, air and water, it will bend towards. Kung meron kang oil sa ibabaw at water sa ilalim, it will still bend towards the denser object, the denser medium. And when the object is denser, the speed of light decreases. Okay? Itong formula na to is not as important as the concept of the angle. So it bends towards it. Meron akong picture dyan. Number 14. The IMA of an inclined plane depends on what? What is IMA? What is an inclined plane? This topic is often looked over by students. But a lot of times mag-a-appear to sa UPCAT, especially yung mga simple machines. So these are basic simple machines. The IMA, ratio between its length and height, ba? Tandaan nyo pa rin. Yes, the IMA is the ideal mechanical advantage. And the ideal mechanical advantage of the following are: for lever, ideal mechanical advantage is the length of the longer side over the length of the shorter side. For an inclined plane, it's length over height. For a wedge, it's length over t. Basically the same as length over height. For a pulley, a single pulley advantage is 1. For a reverse pulley, the advantage is 2. For a complex pulley, depende kung gaano siya ka-complex, magbabago. So every time it changes ratio of the pull, magtataas ang kanyang advantage. And for a screw, the ideal mechanical advantage is a bit complex, 2 pi L over P. Yung P is the distance between the screw. The L is the distance. Okay? Now, why is this critical? Yung L na to, a screw is actually a combination between a lever and a wedge and a wheel and axle. So these are still considered simple machines: a lever, an inclined plane, and a pulley. Their simple combinations, are still considered simple machines. For example, a wheel and axle is a combination of a pulley and a lever. A screw is a combination between an inclined plane, a wedge, and a lever. But they are still all mechanical advantage. Ano po yung IMA na may advantage? Length over width? Wala tayong length over width. It's length over height. Okay? So, the length over height, ang tanong natin sa item natin is inclined plane. Therefore, it's the ratio between its length and its height. So, depending on the question, magbabago yung sagot nyo. So, lever, length over length. Inclined plane's length over height. Pulley is N. Wheel and axle is larger radius over smaller radius. And then screw is a bit complex. Now, you will unlikely be computing the mechanical advantage of any items in the UPCAT. It's simply identifying the equation for it. Okay? But in simple machines, and this is really the principle you need to remember about machines, the mechanical advantage changes the amount of force needed. Yun ang importante dito. The mechanical advantage only changes the amount of force needed, but it will never change the amount of work you put in. In an ideal simple machine, let's look at this example, for example, in an inclined plane. Di ba nagtutulak kayo ng mga mabibigat na bagay sa inclined plane, and you're able to push it up the inclined plane. That's the principle of a simple machine. Because of it, when you push when you push an object in an inclined plane, you are able to do it because the amount of force needed is divided by the ideal mechanical advantage, instead of lifting it up the same height. But the amount of work you put in is still exactly the same. So the ideal mechanical advantage reduces the amount of force but does not change the amount of work. Yun ang kailangan nyo tindaan sa mga machines. So ano po yung N for pulley? Ano nga ba to? Well, it is the ideal mechanical advantage of the pulley. Kung simple pulley siya, basic siya, combination of the pulley, you'll get N equals 1. Ano nga itong pulley na to? Yung stationary pulley is N equals 1. Movable pulley, N equals 2. Complex pulley, it depends on the number of combinations. Not Newton. Number of movement yata to. Number of moving parts. Ano po ang combination ng pulley at screw? Wala. Combination ng pulley and lever ang wheel and axle. A screw is a combination of wedge and lever. So, sir, tumataas ang distance. Yes. Kumbaga, sa inclined plane na pinag-uusapan natin dito, you push it at a farther distance but less force. As compared to lifting it up, the amount of force needed is much less, but the total distance is shorter. All right? So the amount of work is the same. And remember, work is also energy. And you cannot change the amount of energy. It will always be the same. Ano ang N2? It means this is a stationary pulley, this is a movable pulley, and this is a block and tackle or complex pulley. Okay? Letter D. Next item, number 15. The period of a pendulum depends on its what? The period of a pendulum depends on its ano ba ang period ng pendulum? Mass, total length, total energy, length, maximum speed. Alright. Nakakita na kayo ng mga grandfather clock, yung may gumagalaw sa ilalim, moving left and right, di ba? Bakit gumagamit ng grandfather clock to measure time? It's because at exactly 1 meter, whatever the weight at the bottom, at exactly 1 meter long, you can move a pendulum with a period of 1 second. So kung meron ka kung wala kang clock, for example, at gusto mong may timer kang kailangan, you simply need to produce a 1 meter long pendulum and then you release it. Ang movement niya is 1 second. Okay? So the formula is 2 pi square root of L over G. Kung makikita nyo, G is constant, pi is constant, it's only dependent on L. The amplitude, kung paano bitawan, when you release a bob, it goes to equilibrium position, it goes to the trajectory and returns. But with the law of conservation of energy, this is what happens. I remember this part. So length lang siya. I remember this experiment when we were in high school. Okay? Gawin nyo rin to kung meron, sorry, kayo pala yung malas na batch. Wala kayo may experience sa science fair. Wala kayo may experience sa science fair na, but I remember doing this as our science fair experiment. And I'll show you something. Paano ba to? Stop mo na ang screen sharing. And then I'll go to YouTube, start desktop sharing your entire screen. No, Chrome tab. Trust in Physics, YouTube, share. Wait lang ha. If you actually look at this, kita na ba? Ito pala yung problema. I don't know if you see it. Yeah. Sharing your screen, you're seeing a YouTube video. I'm not sure how quickly this is visible with your batch, but if you look at this, when the pendulum is released, it releases across the room, it goes forward, and then it never returns to the exact position. Nakita nyo ba? Hindi masyado visible. Okay, I tried to show it. When I do this in class, when I do this in an actual class, I show videos in my lecture. I try to do it now, medyo mahirap pala. For those who were able to see it, visible naman pala sa iba. So what happened? The pendulum moves forward and it never returns back. Ginagawa namin yung experiment na yan and we try to victimize the younger batches. Sila yung pinapa-volunteer namin. So you have a bowling ball, ididikit namin sa ilong, and then when you release it, it goes across the room and returns back, but it never really hits the face. Ulitin ko na lang ulit. Sige, pakita ko na para ano. Okay, start desktop sharing. App, Chrome tab, YouTube, share. And then I go back a few seconds. Check ulit. So, ano? Okay, black pa siya ngayon. But now, the YouTube video is visible. Explain ko yung grandfather clock, ba't hindi tumitigil. So, when you release the pendulum, it will release, go across the room, and never hit back. Okay? So, makita niyo sa kanya, barely returning. Okay? Why did it happen? It's because of principle of energy conservation and meron talaga siyang, thank you for sana mag-share ng video. PowerPoint. Share. Okay? So bakit ang grandfather clock never stops? It's because of the battery you put in. Every time it moves at a certain point, the battery pushes it a little. So there's a little machine at the edge of the, imagine mo to, merong maliit na machine dito sa dulo. Okay? Ang ginagawa ng battery mo, yung motor niya, is when it reaches the stop, it pushes it a little. So, sasagi ulit siya sa dulo, pupunta sa kabilang dulo, and then it pushes it a little. So, the tiny push back and forth is enough to maintain the motion of the grandfather clock. Okay? So, sa nakita niyo example ko kanina, it never really returns to the final point unless you push it a little. Sir, paano pagtulak? May maliit lang na motor doon sa dulo na pag tumama yung pendulum, may maliit na switch na tatamaan, ma-activate, itutulak niya with just enough force na i-retain yung movement ng pendulum. So just enough. Gaano kalakas? It doesn't really matter, but it's just enough that the pendulum will maintain 1 second movement ng grandfather clocks. Okay? Number 16. When a vapor condenses, what happens? Does it absorb heat? Does it release heat? Does its temperature rise? Or does its temperature drop? When a vapor condenses, what happens? Letter B, it releases heat. Does the temperature change? Maganda yung tanong kanina, what happens kung sa forehead? Ganun pa rin, it doesn't really reach it. Okay? So when a vapor condenses, what happens? The temperature doesn't change. Tandaan nyo sa chemistry nyo, when the temperature, when water or any material changes its phase, it doesn't change temperature. So at 0 degrees Celsius, for example, it becomes ice. And the temperature doesn't change at that point. At the same time, when it becomes vapor or condenses, the temperature doesn't change. So C and D is wrong. Here's what happens. When ice melts, heat is taken from the environment. When water evaporates, heat energy is taken from the environment. Pupunta doon sa object. And in the reverse direction, when vapor condenses into liquid, heat is released to the environment. And when liquid forms into ice, heat is released to the environment. Okay? So ang question natin is condensation. Vapor condenses into liquid. Therefore, vapor releases heat to the environment. The answer is letter B. It releases heat. May news akong naramdaman ngayon. Your class, eksakto real-time ang balitang narinig ko, your class, virtual classes, officially starts this Monday. Diba? June 1. And on June 1, ang i-discuss namin sa inyo doon is not yet a subject, but basically how to apply for the UPCAT. May nirelease lang sa aking information si Sir Ian exactly this moment that our assessment test is up and you can answer the assessment test. Assess nyo kung anong mga, it's an online exam, you answer it, and you'll be able to get your strengths and weaknesses right now, even before you start the virtual classes. Okay? Let's go to number 17. Yan. Thank you, Mark. Inom lang ako ng konti. Standard atmospheric pressure does not correspond to what? This is basically a question of pressure. Pero if you look at all of it, these are all values of pressure. PSI, Pascal, millibar, and Torricelli. Okay, saan po makita test? Mamaya, nasa review portal nyo. Okay, Sir Ian says it's up. Mamaya, pwede nyo hingiin kay Sir Ian yung link. So which one is the correct answer for number 17? These are all pressure, but one of them is wrong. Okay? So, may warning lang sa akin, Sir Ian. Huwag nyo na munang kunin yung exam. May mga peak hours tayo tsaka off-peak. If all of you go to our website right now para makita yung assessment test, magkakaroon ng problem. So, this is the value of atmospheric pressure. At exactly 1 atm, that is that atmosphere. 1 atmosphere, or equivalent to 760 millimeters mercury, 760 Torricelli, 29.9 inches mercury, or pound per square inch, PSI 14.7, or 101,325 pascals. So which one? Hindi Philippine Stock Index. Pounds per square inch ang PSI. Okay? So which one is not among the choices? In the choices natin, 14.7 PSI, that's correct. 98 pascals is wrong. 101,321 millibars, or 760 Torricelli. The answer is 98 pascals. Okay? There's actually a joke on this. I don't know if you've read this before. Einstein, Newton, and Pascal are hanging out one afternoon. Einstein is bored, so he suggested, let's play hide and seek. Hide and seek, I'll be it. The others agree, so Einstein begins counting. 1, 2, 3. Pascal runs off to find a place to hide. Newton merely takes out a piece of chalk and draws a square on the floor. As he finishes, he steps into the square and Einstein shouts, "Ready or not, here I come." Einstein looks up and immediately spots Newton standing in front of him. He says, "I found you, Newton." Newton replies, "No, you found 1 Newton per square meter. You found Pascal." So this is the joke because, ang haba ng joke, pasensya na. Ito yung joke ng mga matatalino, sabi na nakakainis na to. It's because pressure is given by the equation 1 Newton per meter squared is 1 Pascal. All right? Okay. Mabuti naman at may mga natatawa naman. Ako hindi ako natutuwa sa mga matatalinong joke. Pag nakikita ko sa mga Facebook jokes na yan. Number 18. Ito ngayon ang problem sa question sa comment na nakita ko. Sila lang ang nakakaintindi. You're trying to qualify for UP. Kaya nyo yan. Alright? sorry about that. Kunwari natawa ako. Pwede yan. Ginagawa ko rin minsan yan. Sorry. But may PA, PA sa table. This one? This table, but may Pascal? This is simply Pascal, or that this is the table of 1 atmosphere. Okay? Number 18. A perfectly elastic collision conserves what? So there are two types of collision, an elastic collision or an inelastic collision. There's only one condition where a collision is considered elastic. It's when two objects collide and they separate without any deformation. They conserve the kinetic energy and they conserve the momentum. Okay? In a perfectly elastic collision, they conserve the kinetic energy and they also conserve the momentum. Sinasabi ko na yung tamang sagot. Which one is the correct answer? They conserve kinetic energy and they conserve momentum. The answer should be letter ano dapat? Dapat T. Di ba? If you look at this image, medyo magulo siya, but I think maintindihan nyo to. In an elastic collision, you have initial kinetic energy and you have initial kinetic energy. After they collide, you have a final kinetic energy and you have a final kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is conserved. Total kinetic energy initial, is equal to the total kinetic energy after. Hindi ko lang napakita dito, but the momentum is also conserved. Okay? The momentum, the total momentum is conserved. Actually, even in inelastic collisions, the momentum is conserved. You always have to remember, in a closed universe, there will always be the law of conservation of momentum. Okay? So, ang importante sa kanya, all collisions conserve momentum. Elastic or inelastic, it always conserves momentum. But for inelastic collisions, the total kinetic energy is not equal, the initial, is not equal to the final. Why? What happens? In an inelastic collision, there are some deformations. So kung nakakita kayo ng billiard balls, when they collide with each other, they split. Di ba? That is considered an elastic collision. So babanggaan sila, maghihiwalay, kinetic energy is conserved, momentum is always conserved. Momentum, ano nga po ulit ang momentum? Momentum is mass times velocity. And with any collision, momentum is always conserved. Okay? For inelastic collisions, kinetic energy is not conserved. How does it work? For example, ang example namin lagi for elastic collisions is billiard balls. But if you imagine this, you are running across the field, you are running in a field at 100-meter dash, and habang tumatakbo ka, there is an insect na nasa gitna ng field at bumangga sa'yo. So nagbanggaan kayo, yung insect tumama sa noo mo. Alright? So ano nangyayari? When an insect is squished on your forehead, the momentum change is equal. Yung insect, nagbago ng direction, yung kinetic energy niya was changed, pero nagkaroon ka ngayon ng inelastic collision. So, nakalagay dito na note that objects might bounce off or stick together. May question dito sa Reynald, perfectly inelastic collision means the objects stick together. Hindi siya maghihiwalay. Okay? But for perfectly elastic collision, maghihiwalay siya. But there are some collisions that are inelastic, but there are deformations. So meron ka ngayong loss of energy. Saan napunta yung energy na yon? It went into deformation. If you have two clay balls na pinagdikit mo, magdidikit siya. If you have a bus and a car colliding with each other at nagdikit yung dalawang sasakyan, collision siya. Inelastic collision siya. But most of the time, If you have two cars colliding with each other, for example, tatalbog pa rin sila or maghihiwalay, but the kinetic energies are not intact. That's why my example is usually a man on a motorcycle and collides with an insect. The insect is squished on the forehead, on the helmet of the motorcycle rider. So pag nangyari yon, that is an inelastic collision. Examples po of momentum situation, hindi na nga. Momentum will always be conserved. Yes, conserve pa rin ang momentum pag nagdikit. Ano siya? It is always the same. The momentum of a system will always remain the same, whatever the situation. Saan ba, example, pag nagdikit, paano, nag-iisip ako ng isang example na magko-conserve siya. Mathematical kasi yung model eh. Mahirap kung ipakita yung mathematical model ng conservation of momentum. But it's basically this way. Always remember that the momentum is conserved. So, if one person, for example, equal ang, alam ko na, 2 billiard balls of equal mass, nagta-travel towards each other, pag nagbanggaan siya, maghihiwalay siya, di ba? So, equal mass, equal velocity. When they collide, they split equally. Okay, that is perfectly elastic. But imagine replacing the billiard balls with clay balls. Yung modeling clay nyo. They now travel towards each other, equal velocity, one going to the right, one going to the left. Anong total momentum ng system? The total momentum of the system is 0. Diba? So ano mangyari? When two clay balls hit, they will no longer split apart. Kasi magdidikit na siya. Diba? Mag-confuse na siya. What is the total momentum of the system? The total momentum of the system remains at 0. Billiard balls, ang nangyari, they collide, and then they split, the total momentum is still 0. Clay balls, they collide, they stick together, and stop moving, the total momentum is still the same at 0. Okay? Whenever I discuss physics in classes, I always remind the students that the UPCAT or any college entrance test does not really focus on the computational part of physics. They go to the analytical and conceptual parts of physics. So may tanong, may bibigay sa'yo na situation, and then pipili ka ngayon ng tamang sagot. For example, yung tanong ko kanina, at what situation can there be friction in the same direction as motion? Yun yung magiging, ganun ang type ng mga questions. Okay? So letter D, both momentum and kinetic energy. Number 19. For those of you going into engineering, I will guarantee na magiging second nature nyo ang vector sum. Okay? For those of you, and dating sa point na lahat na ng addition nyo is in vectors. But for those of you who won't be going to engineering, tiisin na lang natin ng konti. For the UPCAT, it will be very simple. There will be very little addition or addition of vectors in the UPCAT. Basically, explaining lang kung ano mangyayari. So, two ropes are used to support a stationary weight W. The tensions in the rope must be, letter A, each be W over 2. That seems to be correct. Diba? Letter B, each be W. Hindi na yan. Kasi dalawa na nga yung rope. Diba? Letter C, have a vector sum of magnitude less than W. Or letter D, have a vector sum of magnitude W. Why is this a question? Bakit hindi letter A ang sagot and bakit sa letter D? If you only imagine two ropes holding an object vertically, the answer is letter A. But because the situation was not stated, you now have to assume that the rope is not vertical. So, pwede siyang may angle na ganito. Okay? This is still the same, two ropes, but because there is an angle, the forces are now different. Okay? HBW. May mga witty rin talaga sa inyo. Okay? So, this one, what's important is the total force up vector has to be equivalent to the force pababa. Alright? So, sa situation natin, the tensions in the rope must be, hindi siya W over 2. If it's vertical, W over 2, that's correct. But since it doesn't necessarily mean vertical, the tension can be computed. And you will have to compute that when you go into engineering. But for now, you only have to remember that the total vertical force must be equal to the total vertical force and the total horizontal force must be 0 because the object is stationary. Diba? So meron ka ngayong mass times gravity and you have tension dun sa 45-degree rope and tension dun sa 30-degree rope. The tensions are different, but the vertical forces are equal to mass times gravity. Right? So the answer to this one is letter D. Have a vector sum of magnitude W. It cannot be less. Okay? In fact, hindi ko na kayo gugulhin. It cannot be less. It has to be equal to magnitude is equal to W. Okay, let's proceed. Wala nang question dito. Talaga, lahat kayo hindi makaget over sa HBW, no? Ako rin eh. May joke na ako ngayon. Number 20. This is a complex problem. Sino kaya dito ang nakahula ng tamang sagot? Or sino dito ang alam talaga ang tamang sagot? Number 20. I'd like to hear your answers. A 2-kilogram stone at the end of a string, 1 meter long, is whirled in a vertical circle at constant speed. The speed of the stone is 4 meters per second. The tension of the string is 51.6 newtons. When the stone is blank. Wala pa bang sagot na A? I never noticed. Medyo random ang aking distribution dito. But which one? B yata? Sino kaya dito ang sure sa sagot nila? Maraming magsasagot ng yata. Pero, yeah, B yata, C yata. How do you solve this without really computing? Can you solve this without really computing that much? Okay? Ang mahirap dito is it is a complex problem. Bumulong ulit ako, pasensya na. How do you solve this one? First, you have to remember the weight of the stone. Kapag 2 kilograms, magkakaroon siya ng weight, di ba? Your weight is mass times gravity. So, pakita ko tayo yung formula to. Ay, nakakalimutan ko maglagay ng animation. But anyway, ako bumulong. Sorry. Bumulong ako na tungkol sa pambayad sa ano. Nakakatakot ba talaga akong bumulong? Sorry ah. Sorry about that. Sabi ko kasi sa misis ko, manghingi ng pambayad ng mangga. Right? So, the weight of the stone, tingnan mo muna to. The object is turned in uniform circular motion. You always need to remember that in uniform circular motion, there is force going towards the center. Diba? So, the tension has to oppose that force. If the weight of the object is 2 kilograms times g, you get 19.6 newtons. Anong problem natin? 51.6. Diba? Nasaan ang 1,000? Nagsabi ako ng 1,000. Manghingi ng 1,000. Actually, gusto kong mag-try nga mag-voice actor one day. But not this time kasi walang mga voice actors ngayon. Okay? So the mass is, the weight is 19.6 newtons. The given is 51.6. If you don't know the formula of mv squared over r, medyo hirap na kayo. But if you compute it, you get 32 newtons. Meaning, if you simply turn it around, meron kang mass, meron kang velocity. If you whirl it above your head, ang mangyayari sa kanya, the tension of the rope is 32 newtons. Diba? But since you turn it vertically, mag-a-add ngayon itong weight na to or magsusubtract depende sa position niya. At the top of the rope, the tension will be countered by the weight. At the bottom of the turn, the tension will be added with the weight. At the side, combination siya. May tension ka pa paloob, meron kang force pababa. Medyo nakakasabaw. Ganun lang talaga to physics. So, which one? Among the choices, meron kang 19.6 at meron kang 32 newtons. Saan mo makukuha ngayon ang value ng 51.6? It's when you add these two values. So when you add these two values, 19.6 plus 32, you actually get 51.6. And saan nga magkakaroon ng addition? Sa bottom, sa top, or sa middle? At the top, it's subtraction. At the bottom, it's addition. The answer for this one is letter B, at the bottom of the circle. All right? Okay. Now, how do you solve this without computing? Here is the technique. This is a bit of a complex problem. Medyo ano lang kayo dito. The good thing about physics, and this is the reason why I went into engineering. In physics, it is practical. What happens in real life happens in physics. So, 2 kilogram stone, alam kong hindi kayo makakapagpaikot ng 2 kilogram stone, but you've tried whirling an object before, di ba? And when you whirl an object, at the bottom, it becomes harder. At the top, it becomes a little lighter. Di ba? Now, if you only have the weight, at nakita mo na masyadong malaki ang difference, it can either be at the bottom or halfway down. Ganun lang computation yon. So, manghuhula ka ngayon dito. So, the answer for this one, for this item is, pagkakita ko pa lang ng problem, without computing this, I immediately knew that it's going to be at the bottom. Ano po pag halfway? Addition or subtraction? Ang ganda ng question mo. But for halfway, it's going to be like this. Halfway down tayo. Let's look at this part of the graph. Kita ba? Okay. Ano mangyayari dito? V itong nakalagay dito, but for now, just for my example, gawin natin tong F din na pababa. Ano mangyayari sa inyo? You will have a vector addition. And vector addition is magkakaroon ka ngayon ng angle of tension. Alright? So, ang point lang dito, the UPCAT will not give you a problem that you will need a calculator. So, paano ko ito hinulaan? At the top of the circle, it's subtraction. At the bottom of the circle, it's addition. Halfway down, meron kang angles. And when you have angles, you cannot really compute. You don't have a calculator. It's going to be practically impossible for you to compute this one. And they will not give you an item in the UPCAT that you have to compute in a complex manner. So, tinanggal ko na kaagad yung halfway down. So, pag may mga angles kayo sa vector, except for, tawag dito, yung mga special angles, hindi nyo kayang i-compute without a calculator. And UPCAT examiners know that. Okay? So, the answer for this one would either be A or B. And then, since masyado mababa ang sagot dito, the answer will now be at the bottom of the circle. Okay? So, yun ang tatandaan nyo when answering questions in the UPCAT. Even if there is a solution for a complex problem, you remove the possible answer that the solution is too complex. Nandun lang yan pampagulo. I remember the time, kasi when I was already in college, merong manghuhula na lang ang talino pa rin. Ganun talaga. Ganun ang gagawin natin sa 37 tips. Paano manghula ng mas matalino. Okay? Number 21. I am actually quite on time. Number 21. Which of the following is not a unit of energy? Which of the following is not a unit of energy? Joule, erg, kilowatt hour, or Newton? The answer to this one is not as important as the explanation. Okay? But basically, Newton is a force. So alam nyo na hindi siya. Energy kasi is work. So you all understand that one joule is the unit of energy, calorie is also a unit of energy, and calorie is the amount of energy needed to increase 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. So yun ang calorie. Energy, kilocalorie naman, yung 1,000 grams of water by 1 degree Celsius. 1 calorie is 4.184 joules. So joule, calorie, and kilowatt hours are all units of energy. The other unit of energy is this. Work ang energy, tandaan nyo siya. So joule, erg, or foot-pound. Matagal nang hindi ginagamit ang CGS system. But believe it or not, it's actually quite useful. When you are in a precision field, pag pumasok kayo sa very specific na engineering, which is precision, gagamit pa rin kayo ng CGS system. This is the centimeter, gram, second. For most of you, we will only encounter SI. And halos wala nang gumagamit ng British or British Imperial or the United States system. Yung pound or foot. Alright? So SI na yung ginagamit. Unti-unti, SI na lang. So the answer for this one is, nakalagay din dito actually na Newton is actually a force. The answer for this one is letter D, Newton. Okay? What's more important is this. You have to remember that work and heat is also equal to energy. So Newton times meter, you have 1 joule. Okay, number 22. The rational analog of force in linear motion is, napaka-complex ng pagkakadescribe nito, but the rotational analog of force in linear motion is this. When you have rotation, you will always consider either angular velocity, angular momentum, or torque. Torque is equivalent to force. Angular momentum is equivalent to momentum. Angular velocity is equivalent to velocity. Okay? So for number 22, the answer is, tama kayong lahat, it's torque. Okay? Babalik ako dito para lang makita nyo ulit yung animation. Yung problema sa GIF na nakita ko, once it happens, walang nangyayari. So if you have a force, the torque is counterclockwise. And if you have negative torque naman, the force is clockwise. Here is my question. Paano naging positive ang counterclockwise rotation and negative ang clockwise rotation? It doesn't really matter. Okay? It's just an agreement. Torque is force when it means rotation. So the answer for this one is letter C, torque, and you all agree. And how is it solved? Force times distance from the pivot. So balik ako para lumawas ulit animation. So mag-animate siya. Alright? Tiring talaga magklase ng online. Kumusta kayo? Mga buhay pa ba? Number 23. This is a complex problem. Young's modulus. Do you really need to compute it? If you encounter a question like this in the UPCAT, here is my tip. Ignore it. Okay? Why? It's too complex of a problem na ang hirap niya i-compute. Okay? But we will compute this. I'll also teach you how to solve an item like this. But for those of you na nalito, parang, napaka-complex naman niya, bakit ito lumabas sa UPCAT? Sometimes, they put in complex problems in the UPCAT for you to waste your time in. It is also a test of intelligence when to choose to answer an item. If you encounter a question as complex as this one, skip. But if you're going to guess, I will also give you a possibility of guessing. Okay? A wire, isolve natin dito ha. How do you guess? Just by looking at this one, my guess is letter A. I will not compute, but my guess is letter A. Bakit letter A ang magiging guess ko dito? One, what is familiar with 9.8? It's about gravity. Diba? So, nanguhula ka ngayon. Bakit parang familiar na 9.8? It's gravity. And you look at this, it's gravity. Yes, pwede mong balikan ang previous items sa UPCAT. Actually, my tip is always skip. Whenever you find a difficult question, skip na lang. Okay? So, bakit familiar 9.8 is gravity? So, when I look at this, may gravity dito, may nakasuspend, puro 1 yung nakalagay dito, the answer should be about 9.8. The problem now is it 9.8 times 10 to the 10 or 98 times 10 to the 10? It's actually quite similar. For me, the answer should be 9.8 times 10 to the 10. Okay, so it's letter A. You're just guessing, but here is the principle of this. What is Young's modulus? When you pull a rubber band, it stretches. When an item is suspended in a steel, the steel also stretches. The amount of matter cannot change. So ano nangyayari doon sa object? The steel rod actually shrinks a little. Okay? So how do you solve this? Young's modulus is basically the stress over strain. When you pull it at a force, the area shrinks a little and the length increases a little. So the force over area over the change in length over the total length. Again, because of the principle of this is Young's modulus principle, ma-solve nyo that this is the answer, and by solving it, you get 9.8 times 10 to the 10 Pascal. When I saw this item, sabi ko, this is too complex. I wanted to remove it, pero na-realize ko, this is a perfect example on how to guess. Okay? So pag may na-encounter kayong ganitong question, puro 1 ang naandito, and you really need to guess, the answer would be what is familiar, 9.8. So naituro ko pa rin, Young's modulus is stress over strain, but it's too complex. An item like that ay hindi mo kailangang alam to answer in the UPCAT. Masyadong complex ng principles na to. This is for college. But sometimes they put in questions that are complex to see if you know how to select the correct answer. For this one, the correct answer is, meron kayong similar problem, gravity, 9.8. So which one is the most ideal? 9.8. Okay? Kasi puro 1 naman ang nakalagay. Kuha? Diba? 1, 10 centimeters, 200 kilograms, 0.1, 10 millimeters. Tas may gravity, 9.8. Kung nagkaroon dito ng 2, for example, ginawa siya 200 kilograms, hindi na siya 9.8. Maglalaro ka na ngayon ng ibang values. Yung pati, tama yung scientific notation. Ito pati yung clue, di ba? May tama ka puro times 10 to the 10. So it has to be times 10 to the 10 Pascal. I wanted to remove this kasi sabi ko, ang hirap nito. So now, forget about Young's modulus. It's not going to appear in the UPCAT, but the item is for how to guess properly in the UPCAT. Number 24. We're almost done. 2 more items, and the next 2 items are quite short. A radio station broadcasts a frequency of 650 kilocycles per second. The wavelength of the radio wave is what? Okay. The formula for computing the wavelength given the frequency is this. First, you have to remember the electromagnetic frequency, diba? From gamma ray to X-ray to ultraviolet to visible light to infrared, microwave, and radio. Increasing frequency, shortening wavelength is increasing frequency. So radio has lower frequency, lower energy. Okay? Microwave, infrared, and visible light. So ano sequence niya? May mga ano to, may mnemonic to, di ba? Hindi ko natanda yung mnemonic nito. Parang mga Martians yata. So for those who know the mnemonic of the ultramagnetic spectrum, electromagnetic spectrum, do so. I don't have it memorized. But radio is the largest wavelength and gamma rays has the shortest wavelength. Why am I showing this one? Because it's a radio wave, yung problem natin. The formula for wavelength is this. The wavelength is equal to the velocity over the frequency. So given tayo ng frequency, the frequency is 650 kilocycles per second. That is the frequency. Ano ngayon ang velocity? The velocity, you have to remember, the wavelength of a radio wave is the speed of light over frequency. Paano nyo ngayon isosolve to? Unfortunately, it's manual. 3 times 10 to the 8 meters per second, which is the speed of light, over 650 times 10 to the 3 cycles per second, or hertz, and you will get 461.5. Okay? That's not really the principle I wanted to teach with this one. So, 2 principles. Wavelength is velocity over frequency. Madalas sa UPCAT, ang itatanong sa inyo, what is the wavelength of actual physical waves? May bibigay siya na velocity. So, madali na i-compute yan. But I also wanted to teach you this. Yung mnemonic ng radio wave, microwave, infrared, visible, ultraviolet, X-ray, and gamma ray. Alright? Yes. Lahat yan, basta radio wave, it travels at the speed of light. Kasi basically, light is just the spectrum nakita natin. But all of it travels at the speed of light. How to get the speed of light? The speed of light is 3 times 10 to the 8. Yun na lang lagi yun. 3 times 10 to the 8. Kung gusto mo na mas precise, 2.996 times 10 to the 8. But it's simply 3 times 10 to the 8. It's constant in our universe. Okay? And finally, number 25, the electron volt is a unit of what? Naalala niyo yung mga ano? So, a voltage is potential. Ito yan ha. Electric potential is voltage. Momentum is motion. Charge is in coulomb. And an electron volt is to energy. So, may mag-sample sa inyo kanina. What is an electron volt? An electron volt is the amount of energy of a single electron. Therefore, 1 electron volt is 1.6 times 10 to the negative 19 joules. So the answer for this one is, again, energy. That is, I think, letter C. All right? May mga questions ba kayo? Kasi we can go. Anong sagot sa number 24? For number 24, the answer is 461.5. Unfortunately, there is only one way to get this. You have to compute. Madali naman mag-divide ng 3 by 6.5. So you'll be able to get 461.5 meters. For number 25, the answer is energy, letter C. So with that, thank you everyone for being here. If you have questions, post it at our Facebook group para may mga tanong tayo. Kung wala na kayong mga tanong, Sir Ian has posted the assessment test. Huwag lang daw kayo magsabay-sabay kasi ma-drop yung website. If you visit during the off hours, mas magandang maano nyo sa kanya. And then, you'll be able to assess. But with that, see you everyone, and see you again on tomorrow for our English session.